What's up, y'all? This is Mike Manza with another Manza Faust Productions video. And, took a little bit of time off. I haven't had my head in the right space, really. Not going to go into detail about it in this, but, yeah, I just had to take a couple of days to kind of decompress and just get my head on straight. But, I'm doing okay. So, today I'm back. Gonna do another stop, watch, and listen. Putting this off for a couple of weeks. I went to the convention real quick. I'm not a convention guy, and I've realized that like definitively now, and I don't think I'm gonna be doing that very much. I went and pretty much the only table I bought from was Archive, and I would have done that anyway. So yeah, it didn't do much for me. It's too crowded, too much craziness going on. The prices are insane at these things. Stuff I've already known forever. And I don't see the point anymore. I go to Archive all the time. I'll get anything I need there. Usually I'm just buying up posters and Blu-rays and T-shirts anyway. So not really necessary for me. But rant over about that. Let's get into these Vinegar Syndrome releases from September. And just as like an overview, I really enjoyed all of these. Obviously some more than others, but I felt like September was a really solid month. Um, and the next 2 months obviously are going to be pretty insane as well. Really excited about a lot of the stuff coming out. Um, so, yeah. Anyway, starting off, kind of going to go in reverse order of like what I like the least to what I like the best. First up, we got Arnold. This is from 1973. This is more of like a slapsticky kind of goofy, just like kind of taking the piss out of like those classic gothic, like kind of Hammer horror films, maybe a little bit before that. Just your kind of basic story of this guy dies, and on his at his funeral is also his wedding, and basically the woman that marries him has to stay in his giant mansion. He's like a lordship or something like that. uh she has to stay with the corpse, like, kind of keep it company, I guess. And he has all these tapes recorded, um, like little cassette tapes. You pop in the cassette tape to the side of the coffin, and it like talks to you, which opens it up for a lot of like really over the top kind of dumb gags. There's this really annoying song in the beginning that is just kind of weak enough not to be overly catchy. So I mean, personally, it didn't get stuck in my head too much. It's just kind of like a weak song, but it's silly, and you kind of forget about it until the end of the movie, and it comes back, and you're just like, oh yeah, that was a thing. Uh, it's fun though, like the wife um keeps bringing this guy around, and obviously the Arnold doesn't like him, so people start getting picked off, and all this weird shit with the cops locally, and you got all this stuff with like a graveyard, and every time somebody dies, they're being buried, and the grave has some kind of stupid pun on it, or just it's a silly film. It's kind of just like that sort of um Vinegar Syndrome releases a lot of these kind of more like kind of piss take, kind of parody kind of films. This one's played a lot more straight than something like Pandemonium or Wacko. Two movies I'm not really a fan of, but Yeah, pretty solid release. I like how the movie looks and stuff. Really not my thing, but it was enjoyable, so can't complain too much. Up next, movie that kind of like I felt like I had to rewatch it. I didn't, but I feel like maybe if I rewatch it, I can remember more about it because it just kind of blended together. Evil Judgment. This was a Canadian film, sort of like a giallo style kind of, you know, mystery horror slasher kind of thing going on with this. It's from 1984. Um, Basically, this young dancer is stalked by some killer. Um, she goes off to turn like she's like a dancer, but she goes with her friend who's trying to turn her to the world of prostitution. So they go to turn a trick over at this kind of rich dude's house mansion, and kind of goes awry. The girl that got her into the situation ends up getting killed. Um, and her boyfriend was part of like a mob kind of situation. Uh, and there's this, you know, it's heavily implied throughout the movie that it's this judge who was fired and killed. I forget what the story behind it is. This movie kind of just I couldn't remember much of it after I finished watching it, but I remember enjoying it. The kills are very cool, are very over the top. It does have that giallo kind of feel to it. The suspense is played off very well. The characters are fairly well played. I remember that. I remember thinking the characters seemed realistic and authentic, and it's not too over the top in their performances. Pretty decent film. Might revisit it just to get more of like an idea of it because it is a little bit forgettable. It might have also been the mood I was in at the time, but yeah, Evil Judgment, not a bad flick. Up next, we got another classic Hong Kong release. This is Ghost Nursing. I mentioned this in the unboxing video, but that is a great cover. Um, you got the original poster, which is kind of cool as well. This is a Hong Kong film from 1982. Um, Even though it's around the same time, this does have a bit of like a early Sam Raimi, Evil Dead, even a little bit of like later on with Evil Dead 2, some of the more slapsticky kind of camera tricks and the fast editing kind of stuff. That Sam Raimi would become very popular for later on in the 80s. But this was a lot of fun. It's basically this woman is getting, she, ends up getting involved with this guy, and she goes to this bar to hook up with him, and there's this other guy who's just constantly stalking her, and like he's got these two goons, and he wants her for himself. He's just like one of these, like, I guess he's got some kind of, I guess he's like a yakuza don or whatever they call him, and like he's just like an obnoxious prick. And he wants her for himself, so he's very just kind of controlling, and he has these two goons who are kind of just like have no personality. They're just kind of there to do his dirty work. And they end up shooting the guy that she was, actually wanting to be with. So she's forced to go off with this other dude. Um, so she ends up going to Uh, anyway, she goes to this guy, kind of a master guru, um, who works with like spirits, and she has to adopt this kind of, you know, ghost child, which is kind of a corpse of like a fetus kind of thing, and uh, you know, feed it her own blood. There's like this kind of like ritual about it, and this ghost will kind of help her and guide her through like a lot of this kind of stuff, and defend her against these sort of enemies. Because she's got a lot of guys that are just like on her, and she has no interest in them, and they just don't get the hint. You know, that kind of thing. There is a scene on a boat, where this one guy will just not leave her alone. She obviously has no interest in him, and he has this whole like, oh yeah, I could get any girl I want. I'm like Mr. Fly and stuff, and he's obviously not. He has no idea what the fuck she wants. Um, and the ghost ends up like taking over him. There's a great scene in this kind of like shower a bathroom kind of situation, sort of locker room situation, where the ghost takes over the two goons, um and they just start shooting each other and stuff like that. It's pretty entertaining, pretty wacky. You got the usual like kind of slapsticky elements. The scenes with the master, spiritualist kind of guy, it's pretty ridiculous. He's doing all these crazy moves, and like it's pretty entertaining. It's pretty over the top. The kills are amazing. Later on, you have this kind of uh, like religious element where this guy comes in, with one of his friends to try to destroy her kind of he tries to destroy this like ghost baby, um, which is very over the top. But I enjoy that part a lot because I love these kind of like um, you know kind of plays on exorcist kind of tropes, and the over the top evangelical kind of religion where they like act as if they're like the righteous high and mighty, but they're actually in it for their own kind of selfish needs. Uh, and it just goes over the top from there. It's just very entertaining. The kills are just hilarious in this. There's this one kind of famous one with like a one of those like old like novelty like forks that like you'd see at your grandmother's house or something on the wall as decoration. There's a kill involved with that, and it's pretty entertaining. What I really love about this disc, though, is there is a uh, kind of video essay on the history of ghosts and black magic in Hong Kong cinema, which is a big thing. And this is one of those like video essays. I have a pen and paper. I'm writing down like the fucking titles of a lot of these because I love a lot of these Hong Kong films. I'm not really like a big ghost story kind of guy, but I do feel like obviously like Japan does an excellent job. They're one of the best at writing like great ghost stories. I love the god, yokai monster kind of movies. Those are amazing. I love the kind of designs of those monsters. Just very entertaining. And Hong Kong has its own kind of ghost story tradition, so those are really a lot of fun. And the video essay is done by Sam Deegan, she does an excellent job on a lot of these video essays. Very well researched and just nice to listen to talk about these kind of things. Um, And like I said, it introduces you to a lot of these like lesser known titles. Hopefully, a lot of which will be released by either Vinegar Syndrome, Unearthed, all these labels that are really coming out with really 88 films. The classic kind of Hong Kong. This is like pre Category 3, but it does talk about how like a lot of these like movies that came out before the Category 3 rating was established are almost like proto Category 3, kind of in the same kind of universe. Same kind of over the top subject matter and presentation. Very much like a humorous kind of take in a lot of these as well. Um, just sort of the character dynamics and everything like that. It's really kind of interesting, and I want to check out a lot of those like earlier films. In particular, Black Magic looks awesome. So, um, yeah, really recommend checking out Ghost Nursing. Really fun. But my favorite of the month, even though it's admittedly pretty bad film, infamously bad. The restoration doesn't look like spectacular. I really think they did everything they could have. And it looks pretty good. I watched it on like my projector, so it's gonna pick out a little bit of pixelation. I always thought this was shot on video, and watching it again, it definitely feels very video-esque, but it is shot on film. Otherwise, Vinegar Syndrome wouldn't release it. It would go to one of the partner labels. But as I've been saying the last couple of months, the work they've been doing with these kind of like lower tier, but still pretty popular titles within the Trauma catalog, has been really exciting for me. Back in the day, they used to do like Play Dead. I believe Nightmare Weekend was part of the whole Trauma thing. There was a few of these coming out next month, like in October. The Trauma releases are just out of control. A little bit of a spoiler alert. I am really excited for Blood-Sucking Freaks because I know that it's going to be like at Vinegar Syndrome is doing the restoration and everything like that. They always make everything look incredible. And that movie has kind of suffered from, I've heard the Blu-ray pretty much looks like the DVD. The DVD looks like it's straight up a rip of the VHS. I've actually done that experiment. I was staying at a friend's house like decades ago, and like 15 years. And he had a copy of the VHS and the DVD, so I did that like side to side comparison board one afternoon, and they looked exactly the same. So seeing that Vinegar Syndrome was doing a nice like UHD upgrade of it, a lot of great features, but finally get like Blood-Sucking Freaks, which I love. I think it's a fun, amazing kind of film. It does fall into that kind of like Wizard of Gore kind of category. I do enjoy it a little bit more than Wizard of Gore, even though Wizard of Gore is another classic. Definitely some of the top tier Herschel Gordon Lewis film. But I've always had kind of a soft spot for Blood-Sucking Freaks. So I'm really excited about that. They're also doing Rabid Grannies, and there was another one that I cannot remember. But it's a pretty solid kind of slate of, just continuing these great, like, Trauma titles, which is really exciting for me because whenever Trauma would put out DVDs back in the day, they'd either be these cheap budget DVDs, you get like 10 of them in like this box from like Newbury Comics for $10, and they'd be kind of crummy versions of a lot of these movies. I believe Nitrate to Terror was in one of them too, and I wouldn't appreciate any of these because they're on like a crappy kind of DVD copy until Vinegar Syndrome would put out their version of them, especially Nightmare Weekend, is just such an amazingly goofy and over the top kind of film. Uh, just seeing it like actually cleaned up and looking amazing really does help sell that film. Uh, and um, just seeing them continue to release these, because like even later on, Trauma would release some of like their bigger titles, but their features, in my opinion, were always trash. It was always these like reused features that were on like every DVD, and it felt like a lot of them were just like, let's just put out this big release, but all the fucking special features are pretty much worthless. Back in like the DVD days, like you had companies that definitely just dump stuff. I don't know what that was all about. Um, it kind of turned me off from Trauma for a long time. And I know that they do put out their own Blu-rays every once in a while. I really am interested in checking out the Toxic Avenger 4K that just came out. That set. I mean, I love the Toxic Avenger. If they do a good job cleaning it up and making it look good, which I've heard they did, um, really about that. Uh, that should be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping I get that soon. Could do a review on here at some point. Uh, Anyway, after I got off on that kind of a tangent, let's talk about the my favorite film of this past month, which is Curse of the Screaming Dead. Kind of basic, not much to say about the slipcover. Really, the one that sold me was I love this original artwork. Curse of the Cannibal Confederates is what I always knew it as. And this wasn't bad. I had a lot of fun with this. Like, it's not much going on in this film. The acting is atrocious, which really helps it. Um, I guess it's like there's a warning at the beginning that they had to take audio from like a different source than the actual like on camera audio. Something. It was big description. Which actually makes it sound a little bit more interesting. Like it's not so much off sync. It just feels a little like ethereal and off. And I did kind of enjoy that about it because the dialogue in this is just ridiculous. Like a lot of the characters in this film act like they're like fucking children. Like it's basically like two couples, kind of a in the woods in an RV. Uh, One of them ends up stumbling into a graveyard of like a bunch of old Confederate soldiers, finds one of their diaries and starts reading from it, and takes it, and all this weird stuff starts happening. Um, and uh, it's actually two couples and like another girl. Maybe it's even three couples. I can't even remember. Uh, One of the couples is like this guy, and his like girlfriend wants nothing to do with any of this, complains the entire time, and she's like, I just want to go home. Very childlike kind of performance from her, which is pretty funny. Everybody's kind of bickering at each other. There's one girl who's blind, which sure, uh, it's kind of played off, kind of strange, um, and she's like kind of a little bit too easily frightened by things, and her like because she's blind, she has these sensories that make her hear bells that nobody else can hear, and all this kind of stuff, and people kind of blow her off until they end up hearing it. The guy gets called out by everybody for having the like diary and reading from it, and eventually a bunch of these like old Confederate soldiers come up and terrorize them, and it's great. I love like poorly done. I have a soft spot for poorly done zombie effects, and this one has it in spades. They're all like, obviously like kind of local actors they probably picked up with like really shitty zombie makeup. Well, almost looks like some Spirit Halloween kind of shit. Just kind of muttering around, stumbling around. They have this kind of like reoccurring kind of um, soldier drum kind of score throughout the film. Uh, you know, it works, but it's annoying. It's kind of stupid. There's so much about this film that I should probably be a lot more like critical of. But I just enjoy this kind of thing. I love like this hits all the right spots as far as like crummy B movie magic for me. Like I love this kind of stuff. There's like sort of like a and it's got that nice regional film. This is what was this, North Carolina? Um it works. I really have a lot of fun with this. There's another feature on this. Like when I first talked about this in the unboxing video, I said, "Oh, this goes under a different title," but no, it's a whole nother feature from the year before by the same director called Night of Horror, and it's pretty much the same movie, but it's more in this kind of it reminded me of Last House on Dead End Street, which was a bonus feature on the kind of a secret Easter egg bonus feature on the Corruption Blu-ray back in the day. And just on a side note, definitely pick up that Corruption Blu-ray because yeah, I'm not too big on Last House on Dead End Street, but I really did like Corruption. Really great, like late, like early '80s, late era uh, Jamie Gillis kind of performance in that. A lot of cool, like kind of sleazy businessman kind of vibes from that movie. So I'd recommend that. Night of Horror, I was not into. Sort of the same kind of feelings I have about Last House on Dead End Street. The premise is interesting, but the characters are unlikable and just kind of like don't have much beyond that. Um, it's shot really kind of sloppy. It's sort of played off almost like a stage play. That's sort of like you just put the camera down and have people like act out these scenes in front of it, and it's not a lot of camera work happening. It's very kind of stiff production wise. There are a lot of really cool like making of features on this, interviews with actors, interviews with like kind of film historians and stuff like that. So it is definitely worth it just for the main film. And you could take or leave Night of Horror. You might enjoy it. If you did enjoy Last House on Dead End Street, I am aware it has its fans. You'll probably enjoy Night of Horror. It's the same kind of like burnt out in the kind of in this film. It's burnt out kind of rock star who's on a lot of drugs and kind of like fighting with his bandmates. Um, but it's got a similar kind of aesthetic, the drug thing, the kind of sleazy, horrible people kind of element to it. Um, but yeah, for me, it just didn't do as much for me as the main feature, which I really enjoyed, and it was great going back to it and having like a nice looking like actually like cool release of it. So yeah, Curse of the Cannibal Confederates, also known as Curse of the Screaming Dead. Hell yeah. And like I said, all about these trauma releases. The next 2 months, they're really closing out the year, which has already been very solid. I've been very impressed with this whole year of Vinegar Syndrome releases. Just very happy to be a subscriber because they're coming out with some really cool stuff. And it's always like, you know, exciting to see, like, oh, what are they gonna dig up now? Like, what is this one like grail title that we've all been asking for years that they're gonna drop this month? Uh, November's got some really crazy stuff coming out, and I'll talk about that when the time comes. I'd really like to do like kind of like at the end of November, maybe in December when a partner label month is going on and people are kind of focused on that. It would be really cool to kind of do like a look back at the Vinegar Syndrome kind of catalog, not only from this year but years before, kind of compare and contrast different catalogs from different years. I think that would be really fun. Um, because I feel like the last couple of years they've really stepped up their game, and there's a lot of variety. You get a lot of people complaining on like message boards and places like that, which I have my own reoccurring complaints about those kind of places, but I love what they've been releasing. It has been extremely solid stuff the past couple of years, just one after another. Every month I'm really excited. And it's really exposing me to some really interesting films, and with what they're doing with Vinegar Syndrome Labs, really taking these chances on films and genres and time periods they wouldn't normally touch. It's great for these kind of experiments, and it might lead to something that they're able to release as like a mainline release on the main label, and that's really fucking cool. And I'm here for a lot of it. Even like some of the titles I'm not as big on. Curse of the Blue Lights is one that kind of comes to mind, is one I was kind of underwhelmed by, but it's still cool to have that out there, and it's got its fans, and they were really thrilled about that release. So yeah, very cool. And they always have really great essays and really great documentaries. Um, really give a lot of love to these movies that a lot of people would have ignored in the past, and it's very cool, and I'm very happy to be a part of the community. Really talking up this label because they're doing just amazing work. So those are the films. So yeah, really solid month, but that's not where it ends, because if you remember, this is Stop, Watch, and Listen. So let's get into the listen portion, and let me talk about Archive for a second. So Archive announced the other day that they were having a week-long sale. It goes until this Sunday. Their usual kind of 15% off new, 30% off used. You have the floater bin is filled to the brim this morning. Can't wait to go back there on Friday. Once again, kind of dig through. A lot of cool stuff on sale. I went to pick up a couple of one sheets. Really getting into throwing those up on the wall. You can see behind me one of the ones I picked up at the horror convention, Trauma's War. Went to pick up some more of those, and ended up in the record section, and one of my favorite death metal bands, especially within Swedish death metal. Always been hard to get a hold of these records in any sense on vinyl. They're either very expensive, like this first one, or they just never really made like a solid move to vinyl, unless you want to buy it internationally. Luckily, Nuclear Blast, who's been doing a pretty solid job with their reissues. I'm not really a big fan of a lot of the stuff that Nuclear Blast puts out, but their reissue game is doing very well. Just like like Earache and these other kind of legendary labels, where a lot of the newer stuff they put out is not really my thing, but they do a very good job in getting their back catalog out there and just getting it sounding better than ever. especially with Earache, those like obituary reissues from a couple of years ago, really good. But Nuclear Blast ended up putting out the discography of this band, and I'm really excited about a lot of these releases. These are the first three. They come out in these. They had like a big box set. Not getting the box set for obvious reasons, but they're releasing three titles. Yeah, three titles in these kind of release bundles, three at a time, and they're pretty much going through the whole discography. The last three come out at the end of this month. Still got to get the second three. I'm probably gonna buy up the entire discography. Really like dive into this band. Sort of do the same thing I did by revisiting the Death catalog after a very long time a few years ago when Relapse did all those reissues, which are just gorgeous. So yeah, really excited to dive into the discography of Dismember. Jeez. The lighting in this room is not doing me very many favors. This is like an Everflowing stream, the first record. I should probably take the wrap off, but you know, I'm a weirdo about that kind of thing. Got this nice cyan, however you say that, and black splatter, really cool, kind of a marble. There you go. Very nice. Like, I've talked about in the past how I don't really care about colored vinyl, but, you know, it's a nice bonus sometimes. But yeah, like an Everflowing stream, this is the one I was the most familiar with. This is a classic, like, all-time classic Swedish death metal album. Dismember has kind of a bit more of like a black metal kind of leaning than some of the other bands like Entombed or Carnage. Really enjoy their kind of take on that old school death metal coming from Sweden kind of sound. And this is a beast of a fucking album. Soon to Be Dead, and So Is Life, Dismembered, Sickening Art. Just so many ripping fucking songs. Just such great like musicianship throughout these records as well. Very cool. I'm happy to have that. But, you know, along with that, I also picked up Pieces, their follow-up EP. This comes on a very nice half and half, black and red. And this is really great too. So the other two, you know, this one and the third record, I'm pretty much diving into sort of fresh. I've heard them. I'm very familiar with this EP, but just hearing it on like actual vinyl and you know like these all sound amazing. The remaster work they did on the sound of these records is just so good. They sound better than they probably ever have. So really, really happy about that. And this is just brutal. This is such a good record. Yeah, not much of a description, you know, if you like solid, you know, like early old school Swedish death metal, this is definitely one to check out. And last one, and probably my favorite as far as like the color vinyl kind of thing, we got Indecent and Obscene. This is their second full length. Kind of hard to see the back there. But you got it on this nice blood splatter kind of vinyl, clear, very cool. And yeah, this is just insanely punishing. Very brutal record, just so fucking good. And like, the thing about Dismember is they have a little bit more melody than you're like in Tombs and stuff like that. And there's like some real catchy riffs, some real earworms as far as like the guitar playing and like the kind of song structures on these albums. This is just disgusting and sleazy and brutal. It's like everything I want out of like real good death metal. Because I'm purely like old school when it comes to death metal. I'm not really into like the newer stuff. I respect those bands, but I've always kind of said that like I'm more into like seeing that stuff live than I am of actually listening to it on record. Uh, so, it's what it is. But man, this is such a good fucking record. I am like really happy to get the three of these. I'm really, excited to dive into the rest of their catalog. Seeing all the different sounds and kind of eras of the band. Um, you know, Figuring out like what albums I like more than others. But from what I've heard from people talking about their later releases, they pretty much stay pretty consistent. There's a couple that kind of, you know, are, not as good in a lot of people's eyes, but we'll see. Um, like I said, diving into that Death catalog a few years ago and revisiting a lot of those that I had on CD when I was like in my early 20s, but hadn't revisited in a long time, and just, finding a new appreciation for a lot of the later Death stuff that I had kind of forgotten about was a lot of fun. So I'm really excited, even though I'm even less familiar with the Dismember material. Really excited to dive back into these, and it's cool to see these like Swedish bands that have like this kind of great kind of uh, they're very prolific, but they're consistent throughout their career. Because Entombed, after Wolverine Blues, man, I'm kind of over it. I love Wolverine Blues. I even really love Clandestine, and fucking Left Hand Path is a masterpiece. But they do fall off very quickly after Wolverine Blues, and I do love Wolverine Blues. It's like probably one of the best of that kind of death and roll kind of genre. Um, but yeah, the fact that they fell completely off after that Alice in Chains sounding album that they put out, I just tried to get into it. Tried to think like, oh, maybe there's something that people just don't hear in it, and I can't. It never clicked for me. It's just not good. I'm just gonna say it. And then when they tried to go back to death metal and the kind of death and roll kind of sound, just did nothing for me. Um, yeah, pretty decent. Got a Thunder cover later on, but that's about it from Entombed. But yeah, really excited to dive more into Dismember, just for that reason, because it seems like they're pretty consistent. They stay heavy, but they evolve. I like a band who's definitely consistent. I mentioned Death, Obituary. There's a few that are kind of duds. But that's more into production kind of nitpicks. I feel like Obituary, for what they do, is very consistent and, pretty much puts out solid product every single time. Suffocation is another one of those bands that is always like really good. Obviously, Incantation and Immolation. You ask any big death metal freak, their entire catalog has a lot of great material in it. Um, Even Vader from Poland is another one of those bands that you could pretty much take their entire discography and find good in it. So, uh, with all that in mind, really excited about this Dismember kind of series of reissues coming out through Nuclear Blast. And shout out to Nuclear Blast, man, just for doing really cool reissues with a lot of this kind of stuff. Um, Really cool to see. And I feel like they did those recent Atheist reissues from a couple of years ago, and those are really good too. Um, and it's good to have those in, like constant press, because those are some really amazingly like forward thinking and really great death metal records. Like Atheist is probably one of my favorite old school death metal bands. At least their original three or four records, just they're all solid. So yeah, that'll about do it for this week. If you got any other thoughts on those films I discussed, if you want to talk about these Dismember reissues, or maybe some reissues that you've been noticing throughout this year from Earache or Relapse, Nuclear Blast. It's like we're in a golden age of these really great reissues and taking these like classic albums that were never really like widely available, making them sound amazing and putting out very complete and just gorgeous copies of them. So like people like me who don't want to fork out $200 plus shipping from fuck knows where in Europe, we can actually get a copy of it and, really dive into these bands' careers. It's just very cool to me. And I love seeing a lot of this stuff come out. And one label I want to get into that I haven't yet is FOAD. Their stuff is just very expensive over here. But there are some really great releases on that label. Some really obscure kind of like compilation bands, bands you see on these compilations and you think like, oh, well, they couldn't have anything else. It turns out they have like a bunch of weird tapes that they're able to dig up. I love that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping down the line, when I have money to spend on them, I can get a bunch of those releases and just dive into some really cool stuff on that label. So yeah, go down in the comments. Let's talk about all this stuff, this physical media goodness. Tell me what you think. Do you disagree on those movies? I had some pretty hot takes on a couple of them, I would imagine. We can definitely have a good debate on a few of them. Maybe you enjoyed Arnold best of all of them. I don't know how that would be possible, but stranger things have happened. Like and subscribe if you have not yet. If you want to find me on social media, I am the Hordes of Manzerfaust on Instagram. Got a couple of ideas throughout the week, maybe into next week, depending on how I'm doing mentally, how productive I'm feeling. Got a contest video I might want to do, and I got another kind of new series that I'm sort of working on. So, yeah. Look out for those, and I'll be posting on the Instagram, a bunch of that kind of stuff. Get involved, talk about this kind of stuff, hype up these cool labels, putting out great movies and great records, because that's what it's all about for me, is getting this music out there, getting these films out there, exposing people to cool shit that you're not going to get from streaming and all these other kind of avenues. You have to really be part of this community and, take chances, find new things, and can open up a whole new world for you sometimes. And that's what it's all about. And it's all positive. So that'll about do it. My name is Mike Manzer. This has been another Manzerfaust Productions video. Stay fucking metal.